Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Tom and Ruby, where we are touching on kind of like a bow tie to this season, and we will be back with another season of Tom and Ruby in the near future. But to kind of tie bow on this, we're gonna go ham on a bit of nutrition, a bit of training, a bit of mindset, and some things that you guys really need to take note of, that you need to take home, that you need to kind of question within yourselves as well as within the social media that you see online, because a lot of it can be misleading, a lot of it can confuse you, and it's kind of hard when you don't have a coach to direct you because you don't know who to believe. Like people that have a trusted name, oh, they have this name on them, we should listen to them, but realistically what they're saying does not apply to you, or it's just completely false. But one of the biggest topics that I feel is kind of something that you can say is true, but it depends on how you look at it, depends on how you apply it, is the concept of hard effort, of pushing yourself. Because something can be hard and effortsome, but it doesn't mean it's going to bring you results. Something can be hard and effortsome and bring you results for the short term, but it can fizzle out. It can burn you out because that hard wasn't appropriate for you. That hard was probably too hard with too many different juggling things without taking into account the other variables in your life, the things that you need to fit into your life. Or maybe you started, like most people, you started on whatever program, whatever plan, when you were fresh in mind, when you had the highest level of motivation, when things weren't as chaotic, because it probably was school holidays, work break, whatever it is, or you know what I'm trying to say. And then life gets lifey, or it gets to the middle of the year, everything started accumulating, your fatigue through doing the same thing over and over started accumulating, and now you're questioning, am I doing what's right for me? Is this even going to work? Did I fail? Did I do this? Did I do that? There is no such thing as failure unless you don't have a growth mindset or an open learning mindset to pause, to stop, and to question, what is it that I've done this past year that I can learn from? If I'm not where I want to be, why is that? What stopped me? Most of the time it's our own thinking, which we're going to touch on later with mindset. Most of the time it's our own thinking. Most of the time it's because we applied the same mindset that got us stuck so many times before. So those same demons are coming out, or we were rushed, or we didn't keep the blinders on and focused on our own process. Or sometimes it's just because change is fucking hard, and being harder on yourself, like Tom and I said in our last podcast episode together, being harder on yourself isn't going to work. I actually have this in my Instagram post today, if you saw it, Tom. If being harder on yourself worked, it would have had already, but it's not. And I can relate to this with what I'm working on with my own coach as well, but it's not fitness and nutrition related per se, it's change related. And change is freaking hard regardless, especially when you're trying to fit this piece into an already full life. If you're trying to fit 10 puzzle pieces into a full life, you're making it harder for yourself. Now, that's a lifestyle side aside. How about hard and effortsome with training? Just because it's hard and effortsome doesn't mean that it's going to lead to results. I've had so many clients say that they train heavy and hard, but they still weren't where they were, because what was that hard and effortsome? It wasn't stimulus for what they needed, or it was over stimulus under recovery, under strategic exercise selection. Like, okay, cool, you can do cable kickbacks, you can do freaking baby step ups, but that is like the smallest piece of the puzzle that most of the time you will not need when there are bigger bang for a buck exercises if hypertrophy is your goal. But I'm not saying that step ups aren't great, because they're a great exercise. Cable kickbacks, I can kind of say they're just accessories, they're sprinkles that you probably do not need. I don't think I've ever really did a kickback before, and if I did, I would be chucking a fit and saying I don't want it because it's just a freaking, like, I'm sure Tom agrees with this as well. Like, can you imagine Tom doing a freaking cable kickback? Come on, like.
I don't mind cable kickbacks necessarily. There are better tricep exercises. They're certainly better than dumbbell kickbacks.
That's true. But that's the thing. They're like, what is it that your goal is? What is it that we're fitting it into? What's the whole context of your training? What's the whole context of your life? Now, a good thing to toss into here is there is no such thing as a fat burning exercise. There's no such thing as fat burning training. A lot of people think that they're just going to go ham to the wall with training and they're going to burn more fat. Or if they go in fasted, they're going to burn more fat. And then there's the let's go low carb, let's go keto, let's just eat protein and fats for breakfast, thinking that you're going to burn more fat. But it doesn't work that way. Regardless of what you do, glycogen is your main fuel source. And this is where that whole something can feel hard. You can go in training keto and it can feel freaking damn hard, like you're giving it your very best. But that will not get you the results you want because that very best is functioning at level 6. When if you went in with some carbs in your body, going in well fueled and not fasted, or even if you do go in fast, but you have carbs that are stored in your body because you eat a higher carb diet, that level of hard is going to be at a level 10, a level 11, and that is going to get your results. Just because something feels hard does not mean that it is effective. I had an email in my emails the other day, and I never read emails, but I opened this one. It was really good. So the ones that I open, I'm glad that I do sometimes, but it was a business analogy. You can be having all your systems working efficiently. They can be working really well, but is it effective? AKA, it can feel like it's working. It can look like it's got a system to it, but is it specific for the goals that you want? Is it getting you to where you want to go? Same thing. Hard training, but is it hard and effective for you? Are you recovering well? And a systematic review just got reviewed on keto training, and there were no performance increases with that either. Like, there are no performance benefits. Like, it's kind of crazy, don't you think, Tom, that our main fuel source has become the thing that's been demonized the most. Like our main fuel source that our body runs off, that our brains need.
Yeah. I honestly think it's just contrarianism, though. Like, it's been repeatedly found and demonstrated in sports science literature that people perform better on high carb diets. And it almost feels as though, I don't know, that's just not an interesting message anymore. Like, we kind of solved sports nutrition. And so people need to start thinking of other ways to do it so that it can remain interesting and relevant. Like, yeah, it's just wild to me. There's never been a piece of research done on ketogenic diets and sports performance ever that's found anything other than either it makes you worse or it doesn't make a difference. It kind of depends on how you research these things. Usually, if you're looking at something that is very low intensity, like ultramarathons, like ketogenic diets can fuel those. Or if you're doing single bouts. So if you're looking at a 100-meter sprint, for example, a loss of glycogen isn't really going to be the limiting factor in a 100-meter sprint. It's more to do with buildup of lactate and whatever. But if you look at repeated efforts, or you look at any kind of sport where you're doing multiple sprints per period of whatever, or if you're looking at strength training over a given period of time, like, yeah, ketogenic diets are either a negative or completely neutral. So the fact that they're so popular online, it can only be contrarianism. It can only be people trying to sell something.
You said something important there as well, in that you are still using the carbs for sprints repeated over time. And this is kind of what you can apply to strength training, where you're doing a hard set and then you're recovering and then doing a hard set. You're doing a hard session and then you're recovering and then you're doing a hard session. In between those periods of time, you are using your aerobic system. The more robust that aerobic system, the better you're going to recover. And when you're using your aerobic system, you need to use your mitochondria, which is the energy of the cell. Like the brain of the cell is the mitochondria. And in the brain of the cell is where your body metabolizes fat and carbs. But carbs are the one that is going to be the main fuel source to power that through. So if you are not getting those carbs into your body, you are living pretty much on power saver mode for that training session. Like, yes, you're probably doing the maximum that you can on your computer. You're like working as hard as you can, but your computer's in power saving mode. It looks like you're doing a lot, but the maximum that you can do is within the constraints of your power saving mode, which everything is dimmed down in the background and all this kind of shit as well. Which, if fat loss is your goal, this is probably the worst thing you can do because, like I just said, you're on power saving mode. All the other systems are closed down so you can do the work that you need to do. You're burning less because all the other things are using less energy. Same without training. Like, if you are not fueling your day, which Tom and I have harped on and on about this, again, see, really hard does not make your dieting effective. If you're not fueling your day, you are not going, like, I had this conversation with someone before, and that she asked me this question. She was just like, if I'm eating in a deficit, but I'm a couch potato, will I still lose fat? And I'm like, a calorie deficit isn't all about what you eat. So no, you will not lose fat, because if you're basing your calorie deficit off some arbitrary target, but then you're sitting your ass on a couch, that is not going to be a deficit. Yeah, you will gain weight. Like, a deficit is not all about calories. A surplus is not all about calories. And I hate the whole, is it like 7,500 calories or some shit? Is it 3,500 calories equals a pound or whatever the fuck that is? Like, that is false, because your body has mechanisms inside of it that either upregulate or downregulate. You could overeat and your body could start to burn a lot more heat and let off a lot more heat, let off a lot more sweat, upregulate its other systems, and you'll probably be able to overeat a lot more if your metabolism adapts to that percentage. But at the same time, do that for a longer period of time and you will eventually start gaining body fat. And the same with when you cut your calories. Some people adapt harder, their body systems downregulate harder, but it's still within what we said before. It's not all that much, which is why it's really important to keep an eye on all of these different factors, which I want to dump into Tom's little topic of nutrition that we're going to go into, which is really freaking hard to do if you don't do this very one thing. This very one thing is a foundation phase. We're going to go into that in a second, in like your foundation phase. If you are going to jump straight into a calorie deficit, you are not giving yourself the chance to learn the skills to effectively lose fat, to effectively transform your body, because there is a huge mistake that people make with nutrition. Take it away, Tom.
Yeah, like, so to back up a little bit there, I don't want to give people the impression that when you're looking at fat loss, it needs to be an incredibly complex calculation where you have to keep an eye on all of these things. In practice, keeping an eye on all of the things that Ruby's talking about there is not that difficult. It's a case of maintaining a regular training frequency, maintaining some semblance of day-to-day activity, whether that means just going for a walk or whether it means tracking your steps, like however you want to quantify that. And then it is a case of what I'm going to talk about now, which is quantifying your nutrition. Now, you can do all of this without quantifying anything. People lost fat before smartphones existed. You don't need to track to lose fat. You don't need to track your steps to lose fat, but these things make it a little bit more dependable. If you are measuring the inputs, if the outputs aren't what you want, it's a lot easier to change the inputs. But it is literally, if you want to drop fat, it's literally the case that you just need to exercise frequently and eat a bit less than you were before and be a bit more active. And then if you don't lose fat, eat a bit less. Like, that's what you need to do. But for a variety of reasons, that can be quite difficult for some people. And so Ruby and I both advocate for tracking at least some of the time. And the big mistake that I see a lot of people make when it comes to tracking is doing so inaccurately. I think there's a misstep that people make when they're looking at tracking because of what I've just said. Like, people manage to drop fat without tracking for a really long time. And I think that leads people into thinking that, oh, well, if I'm tracking, I don't need to really pay that much attention to it. But this is a tool that you're using, same as any other tool. And if you're not going to use that tool properly, you're going to make bad decisions. So if you're tracking, and let's say you're shooting for 2,000 calories, and you're tracking 2,000 calories a day, and you're not getting the results that 2,000 calories should be getting you, that doesn't necessarily mean that 2,000 calories was the wrong target if you've been guessing stuff, if you haven't been tracking stuff, if you've been eyeballing stuff, and if you've been Even little things that are not necessarily a bad idea. Like, let's say you have a week where you eat out with friends 3 times because it's 2 people's birthdays and date night, and you eat out all the time. You've got to make some estimates of those meals. Of course, you're not going to be able to track them because you're not going to take scales and weigh everything in the restaurant. And so that week, it might be the case that you eat more than you expect, but it doesn't mean that 2,000 calories is wrong. It doesn't mean you need to change the target. It just means you need to be a little bit more accurate with your tracking. What I think is really surprising to a lot of people, and it's got to be at least 50 people that I've done this with at this point in my millions of years of doing this, is when I'm working with someone who's tracking and they should be losing fat on a given calorie target and they're not dropping fat. We'll have the conversation of how accurately are you tracking? Because if you're tracking really accurately, we're going to need to reduce your calories a bit further. But if you're not tracking accurately, that's the first step, because there's no point in me dropping your calories if you're not hitting the calories that you're supposed to be hitting right now. And inevitably, they're like, oh, well, maybe I'm not tracking as accurate as I could be. Like, I track my meals, but there'll be 200 calories left, and then I just have some snacks in the evening and I don't track those, and I just kind of assume it's about 2,000 calories. Or it'll be like, well, I track everything accurately, but I'll have a couple of nibbles throughout the day, like I'll grab a handful of nuts or I'll eat a piece of cheese when I'm cooking, things like that. And whenever these people start tracking accurately, they're always astounded at either how many calories they were eating or how little they're eating now when they're tracking accurately compared to when they weren't tracking that accurately before. It's really surprising how many calories you can add up during the day. If you don't track the oil that you use to cook one meal, you have a handful of nuts that you don't track, and you estimate how much rice you've eaten. Like, it's astounding how many calories that can add up to. And while it's not going to be the case that is going to lead to the end of the world, 100% that would be enough to cancel out a calorie deficit. And so, yeah, if you're not going to track, that's fine. And there are different ways you can do things. But if you're going to track, it needs to be done accurately, because you're collecting data that you're making decisions with. And if you've got bad data, you'll make bad decisions.
Yeah, and you mentioned there as well a couple of rices, just also realizing how inaccurate even just using cups and spoons can be. If this is something that, like, if you're a petite female, if you're a sedentary female, if you're over 45, everything becomes something that you need to be a lot more intentional with. And if you aren't seeing results for what you're doing, then you're going to have to tighten things up. I know that it's hard, but the harder thing is trying to put in all of this effort and not seeing the results for it, feeling frustrated and disappointed and losing motivation because you're putting in so much effort without seeing the results. So you either need to tighten up the constraints, tighten up the measuring system, or be okay with where you are right now. Like, it's not a forever thing. Fat loss is not a forever thing. Things you need to do in fat loss are not things you need to do to maintain it. It's so much easier to maintain if, like I said at the start of this rant, you do a primer phase, you do a foundation phase, and you allow yourself to build the skills, to build the momentum. And like, a lot of people feel like tracking is obsessive, and it's not. It is obsessive if you try to hit macro targets to the absolute T without giving yourself some wiggle room. Like, give yourself some wiggle room. If you're trying to track 1,500 calories, of course you're going to find it obsessive, because that's an obscene amount of calories to try to track. Don't start trying to track at the same time that you start trying to lose weight. Find what you're eating first. Give yourself the time to do that for at least 2 weeks before you put yourself onto proper maintenance calories for another 2-3 weeks, so that you can use these skills to build up. So you can use this time to build up the skills, to build up the consistency. And if you find it so obsessive, it's probably because you're changing your food every second day or every meal, and you're winging it as you go. Like, winging it makes it obsessive because you're playing macro Tetris as you go. Plan ahead. Have some meals that you have on rotation that you can just plug in. Learn how to construct a meal so that you can literally log in the same foods every single week on a meal plan, but you know how to sub it out. For example, rice, chicken, veggies, spices. How can you change that up? Pasta, mince, veggies, different spices. Turn it into a friggin' shepherd's pie. Turn it into a bloody stir fry. Turn it into just a plain plate with every single thing disintegrated. Like, there are different ways to make the same meal, especially when you're starting out, especially when you're in your fat loss phase. this is why people fail, because they think that what they need to do is what they need to do forever, and then they feel like they can't commit to that for the long term. They feel like, oh, I'm just gonna gain all the weight back. What's the whole point putting in the effort now? I've always failed in the past before. But okay, what mindset did you have before? Because once you realize that you have the capability to lose fat, you will trust yourself more. Once you hold your promises to yourself and do the gritty hard shit of building the habits and showing up for yourself, even if you're not losing weight, you're building proof that you are going to show up, that you can do the things, and that you can apply those things to a fat loss phase. The hardest part is not the fat loss phase. It's the building part. It's the uncomfortableness of not aiming for a fat loss goal, because that is your identity if that's what you've been doing your whole life. Like, you need to give yourself a real chance of success. But if your only metric of success is the scale going down, is how well you hit a 1,200 to 1,500 calorie target, there is going to be no success. Because what happens when the scale isn't a goal anymore? What happens when the scale goes up 2 pounds, 2 kilos, which it is going to do, because your end weight at the end of a diet is not going to be your forever weight. Because as soon as you start eating more, you're going to gain weight. And that's not fat. It's called food weight. It's called glycogen. It's called water weight. It's called you're finally training hard to build muscle and to build the physique that you want. So you're getting more inflammation with that. You're holding more water overall. You're holding more glycogen overall. And that is a good thing. Glycogen isn't fat. It gives you shape. It gives you muscle size, shape. It gives you the hard look that you want. Like, if I find that when my body is well carved up, I look harder because my muscles are full. When I'm not and I'm lacking carbs, I hold more water because my body is stressed because it needs carbs. Like, hard does not mean effective. Hard does not mean it's going to produce results. And this comes into the mindset, with what I was saying about the whole keto thing, blah, blah, blah thing. Something that Tom brought up, which I think is really powerful as well, is, yeah, okay, cool. You feel amazing on keto. You feel amazing on low carb. Doesn't mean that that's what got you the results. Maybe it's because you actually stopped eating freaking lollies every night and dousing down a bag of Doritos every single friggin' time you get emotionally upset, or drinking alcohol every single night. Like, what is it that you've changed in the background that led to the results that you're having? And this isn't just keto, this is anything. Like, I see it all the time in Facebook groups. No, this worked because my body is finally changing. Oh, really? What else changed?
Yeah, like, I'm not being funny. If we take I am losing fat as a sign of, like, this is an approach that is good, you would get results on Slim Fast, or you would get results on, like, Herbalife meal replacements. Like, there are a million different ways for a person to create a calorie deficit. And I mean, to an extent, if someone creates a calorie deficit using keto or even the carnivore diet, if they feel good, like, fair enough. But we need to accept that these things are not long-term sustainable, nor are they good for your health. And I think it's a sign of a industry that is losing its identity, that there are so many people who are quite happy to recommend things that are demonstrably bad for health, like the carnivore diet, because it will help you get lean, and people will hold up leanness as a reason for doing these things that are harming you. Like, they're not good. They're going to lead to problems. And, like, yeah, I have been in this industry for ages, and it's the health and fitness industry, and always has been. And I think when we lose sight of the health side of things, and it becomes literally get a six-pack at all costs, like, it's a sign of an industry that's just enabling people who have a lot of problems. Like, if you're in a place where you're like, I don't care if it's bad for my health, I just need to be lean, I would argue that's, you would be better off speaking to a therapist than a nutritionist, because that's something that you don't need to live with.
I don't think people even equate it to, I don't care about my health, because I think it is healthy, especially when they think that getting to a certain body fat percentage or certain body weight is healthy, when our whole perception of body fat in itself is skewed with the images that we see online as well. Like,
maybe like it might just be the people that I'm exposed to, but I find it very difficult to believe that people really do think it's healthy to take things like clenbuterol. I find it very difficult to believe that people think it's healthy to only eat steak. Like I struggle to believe that anyone actually thinks that. I think there's some people who say they think that, but yeah, I don't know, man. Like
I know what
I
it
don't know
is.
if I just have an expectation that people's IQ is higher than it is.
No,
But
I think it's because people say that shit because they believe that that is what's necessary to get to their end result. So they're saying that they believe that. But
maybe, like, I also think so. Something that I was looking at talking about today actually was I I find it really interesting that there are so many people. So there are so many diets that you can do, right? There's like the carnivore diet, there's the keto diet, there's people following a plant-based diet, not because of like any particular vegan moral convictions, but because they think that you need to eat a plant-based diet. And it's like, in fact, no, there are lots of people who follow a vegan diet who think it's the healthiest diet in the world. Like, I'm vegan. It's not. Like, a vegan diet is at best as good as a Mediterranean diet if you plan it really carefully. And if you don't plan it really carefully, a vegan diet can be really bad for you. But there's this concept of in like ethics called morally lucky, which is where people hold good ethical positions, but it's not because they've like done the groundwork to understand the ethics or anything like that. It's just that they were told that murder is wrong, so they just believe murder is wrong. And like that is true, but they've got no foundation for that. And we see this manifest in some really like strange and unpleasant ways. So the example that I often give when I'm talking to people about this is, so people learn at a very young age that sexual assault is wrong, but they don't learn why. They just learn that it is wrong and they internalize that it's wrong, and that's a good position to hold. But then they struggle to understand why someone who's really drunk can't consent, for instance. And it's because they never learned why sexual assault is wrong. They just learned that it is. And I find that people actually make a lot of decisions in these ways where they just end up looking themselves into a position. So there are a great number of people who are involved in the nutrition space or involved in the health space who will say things like, make sure you get lots of sleep, ensure that you're eating an adequate amount of protein, make sure you're eating plenty of fruits and vegetables, make sure you're managing your stress, make sure you're exercising regularly. And like all of these things are good things, but these are good things that they wanted to do anyway. And then when you get to the topic that they really care about, all of a sudden they don't give a shit about the evidence anymore. So it's like, or they'll tell you all of that because the evidence is really strong and we need to follow the evidence, but also actually butter's really good for you and you need to cook your eggs in butter all the time. When demonstrably, like eating large amounts of butter increases LDL, increases your cardiovascular risk. But because it's the thing that they like, all of a sudden they don't care about evidence anymore. They want to eat the foods that they enjoy. Or it's like people will say you need to exercise, it's so good for cardiovascular health, like you need to make sure that you're exercising regularly, but they'll only lift weights and they'll never do any cardio because they don't like cardio. And it's like, so you never had an evidence-based position, you were never following research, you have not gone through the data and made an objective decision about what the best way to act is. You just like lifting weights, and so you stand on your high ground and say that I am a healthy person because I lift weights, but you'll not do cardio because you don't like it. And it's just, I find a lot of the time people online just look themselves into a lot of generally good ideas because so much of what we learn about health is fairly straightforward, and they happen to agree with it because it means that they get to do things they enjoy. And then when they find out that something they enjoy is something that should maybe not do anymore, they just throw the evidence out the window and then just make up some bullshit to justify it. And I see this all the time in so many places. Like, you must see it too.
Yeah, I was gonna say I see it so many times with cardio, where just
Yeah.
because you don't like doing cardio does not make it bad. Like I would not be doing more than I'm doing right now, but I know the benefits of cardio. I have done more than I have done now, and like this is where social media can be really toxic for a lot of people because, like Tom and I mentioned in another podcast, some people would be way better off just focusing on cardiovascular health as the main priority, like at the start of the program, because they are so cardiovascularly unfit, aerobically unfit, which is going to impact their strength training, their ability to burn fat, their ability to maintain energy through the day, their ability to stave off cravings, to stave off hunger. Once again, what you need to do in one phase isn't forever. Like, I had a girl completely detox her taste buds because she was so used to eating keto and food that was food out at restaurants, that we just went through a phase of, you're just gonna have to grit through the shit for 3 to 4 weeks of just eating plain food. Nothing, no butter, no oil, just veggies, just fruits, just plain old food. And you know what now? She finds fruit even too sweet. So now that is her sweet cravings. She finds when she goes out to restaurants that things are too rich for her. She is actually seeing results for the first time in her life, despite trying keto and all the things in the past, because she trusted me and went through the shit. It took her about 6 months to trust me, but when she finally did, she's seeing the results now. And this is the thing, like, imagine someone who didn't see the results in the first 3 months and said they give up. What's the point? I'm not seeing any results. You need to persist. You need to have persistence. You need to be willing to learn, to grow, to evolve, and to question what it is you believe. Because, like Tom said, we question everything except that which we fundamentally believe to be true, which is a fatal flaw, because everything exists in context. Yes, there are some rules that you cannot override, but how does it apply to you in your context? How does it apply to where you are right now in your life? Because maybe right now, seeking optimal is not the best bet. For many of you that are in summer, seeking optimal is not your best bet because there's vacations all over the world. But then when is seeking optimal really the best bet? Because life is always happening. So you need to seek something that you can stick to that is good enough, and then just keep aiming to make it better and better, and aim for better and better and better. But don't get hard on yourself when things need to scale back a bit, or when they automatically scale back, because life happens, stress happens, you had a shit sleep, you're a human. Like, we bounce back from these things if we allow ourselves to, and don't beat ourselves up over it, which we spoke about on the last podcast as well, which I think is really important. But all this comes down to is make sure that you're being honest with yourself. Back to the nutrition as well, make sure you're actually being honest with yourself. You can't say, is it normal for me to be gaining body fat around my stomach? Or I'm gaining weight, my clothes are feeling tight. If your maintenance calories, that wasn't the coaches doing, that wasn't the calories doing, that wasn't the programs doing. It probably wasn't even your intent. Well, it most likely wasn't your intentional doing, because it just happened. And now you're realizing it. Maybe you weren't as tight on your food as you could have been. Maybe you were moving a little bit less. Maybe your work demands just increased and now you have more stress. So that had a flow and effect to everything else. Your sleep probably went down, which, poor sleep, stress, you're going to gain weight. You're going to feel really tight in your clothes, because all of that leads to more water weight. And then over time, if that actually leads to increased food consumption or decreased movement or decreased training performance, that's when it becomes an issue. But in the short term, that's just water weight. That's just stress. It's okay, but you need to recognize it. And if you're going to be emotionally dysregulated, it becomes a lot harder to make forward progress. And I guess this is kind of what comes into that whole, just because it feels hard does not make it effective. And I feel like if you're in a deficit, or if you're in a fat loss phase, if you're not going to ask yourself the honest questions of, what am I willing to give up? What am I willing to not give up? Is this a period in my life where I can apply myself to a calorie deficit? If you are in a calorie deficit and then life starts getting hectic, are you going to keep pushing through it? Or are you going to actually acknowledge the fact that this isn't a period of time right now for you to keep going and you should get your ass back out to maintenance? Or are you going to live in fear of, what if I just lose all that effort that I put into this calorie deficit? Which you are not. Which, once again, why the foundation phase is so important, and which why having a coach is so important, because they tell you these things. People in general do not just actively put themselves out of a calorie deficit without an inch of fear, unless they already know this stuff, because it makes sense. Eat more food, gain fat. That's how it makes sense in our head, but it doesn't make it reality.
Yeah. Like, this is the thing. Just because eating less is what you need to do to drop fat doesn't mean that if you eat more that fat's going to come on straight away. Like, that's not how that works. But I just kind of want to touch on I just wanted to touch on what you said about how just because it's hard, that doesn't make it effective. I see this all the time with clients that come to me who've been training for a while. I tend to write programs that are relatively low volume, relatively high intensity. So rather than doing 8 exercises, 3 to 4 sets of each exercise, you're probably going to do somewhere between 4 and 6 exercises in a session. You might do somewhere between 2 and 4 sets, depending on the movement. And if someone's used to doing like 4 sets of 12 and they come in and they see like 2 sets of 6 to 8, it can feel as though this is going to be an insufficient amount of volume. But this again is going back to, just because it's hard, that doesn't make it effective. If you can do 4 sets of 12, that intensity is probably really low. Now, it's going to feel quite high because you're getting tired. By the end of the session, you're going to be a sweaty mess. You're going to lie on the floor. You're going to be exhausted. You're probably going to have a huge pump. But if the intensity is low enough to facilitate you doing 4 sets of 12, you're probably not going to be doing enough, close enough to failure to get you any kind of progress. And I find so often that by almost like halving people's volume, they find that they can actually train way harder than they used to, because now on their 3rd set, they're not waiting. They're not leaving a little bit in the tank because it's like, oh God, I've got to do another one after this. Once they're an hour into the session, they're basically done. They're not looking out at 4 other exercises that they're going to sort of manage to get through in an exhausted state, feeling like they're training really hard, but they're training really hard in the same way as like you're moving really fast on mile 26 of a marathon. Like, you're moving as fast as you can, but you fucking slow down. And the same thing happens within training sessions. And I just find that, yeah, if you go to the gym with the intention of getting really tired, you can achieve that in a million different ways. But this tends to lead to really inefficient training. And if your goal is to actually get stronger or build some muscle or even just maintain muscle while in a calorie deficit, you're probably better off doing way less than you're doing now, and certainly doing fewer exercises.
That right there. If you're in a deficit right now, less is better. If you're in menopause right now, perimenopause, less is better. If you're in a hormonally sensitive state right now, less is probably better. If you think that cortisol is making you fat, there is a reason you're believing that. So yes, less is going to be better. And no, it's not the cortisol. It is overrated to think that being covered in sweat, being exhausted, being sore, feeling like your muscles are about to fall off your body is effective. It is underrated to feel good, to feel energized, to feel like you can take on the day after a workout. Like, that is how it should feel 90% of the time.
Yeah,
today,
like you should leave the gym. Like,
yeah.
I really like the way you put that. Like, you should leave the gym feeling worked, but you should feel the gym ready to take on the day. Like, if you train at 6 a.m. and you come out of the gym and you're that tired that you can't complete work, you can't spend time with your loved ones because you're just exhausted, that's not because you've had this incredibly productive training session. It's because you've done too much. Like, if you'd done a third less, you would get the same results and also be better in the rest of your life.
And if body composition is your goal, that is the worst thing you can do for it. And if anything, you'll gain fat doing that, because over time, you're not going to be able to build the muscle that you want because you're not recovering well. But also over time, you're going to be gaining fat because you're putting yourself into a surplus, regardless of whether your calories are at maintenance or deficit, because your activity is now making whatever that is a surplus, because the rest of your day is couch potato mode. So all these things factor in together, which is why it is so important to have a strategy. When you are in compromised states, you can't risk winging it. If you are that person who has been trying things so hard your whole life, feeling like you can't do it, you always let yourself down, you always fail, whatever it is, stop trying to guess your way there and actually believe that you can with a coach and do it the right way for once. Like, honestly, it is the best thing that you can do. Like, there is someone that breaks my heart every time I talk to her in my inbox, because I finally read between the lines. It is not money that is an issue for her. It is the fact that she doesn't believe that she can change, because of the fact that she's been trying so hard for so long, she is not seeing results. And especially when alcohol becomes one of the things that's an issue, or emotional eating, it's like, there is this part of me that I know isn't going to change because it's my comfort. But is it really comfortable? Is it really comfortable where you are right now? Because it doesn't have to be as hard as you make it. Like Tom said, it sounds like it's overly complex to have all these factors measured and managed, but it's actually really easy once you develop that system and give yourself time and remove a timeline, to give yourself the patience to slow down, to not want to achieve everything all at once, and to get someone to guide you with where your priorities should be first. Tom is here. I am here. We are both here. If you need to reach out to either one of us, that is why we made this podcast, so that you can reach out to us, so that we can help you, because we care. And when we come back for season 2, it's going to be back bigger and brighter than ever. But for now, it's what is it that you need to focus on to get you moving the needle? Because I promise you that first step isn't as hard as it needs to be. And it's not emotional eating that's the issue. It's not you're addicted to this food that's the issue. It's not alcohol that's the issue. There is something there that is creating this issue to be the issue. For example, I had a client that I'm so glad she signed up because she thought that she was addicted to food. So she was seeing people to help her break her addiction. And she had a coach before me that she left the day that she signed up with me. She realized that the coach wasn't giving her what she needed. But she thought that she was addicted to food. But in reality, it was the restrictions that had her there, the focus on the scale, the focus on burning calories, that restriction mindset. And just that restriction mindset alone, the thought of I need to lose weight, I need to change my body is enough to make you never get anywhere. And that does not mean your body is not going to change, because it is changing. It is changing. And you're giving yourself more potential to change in the future by taking your foot off the gas and allowing your car to go into service to get the body work done on it. Anything else to say to that, mister?
Yeah, like I just think it's really easy to see the trap that people fall into with this as well, where when you're training as hard as you can, which usually means excessive volume, and you're dieting as hard as you can, which usually means excessively restrictive, it doesn't work. And it doesn't work because you get excessively fatigued, you can't stick to it, the nutrition is so restrictive that you're starving and you've got no provisions for when you're eating socially. And the issue is when that doesn't work, because we seem to have this mentality of fat loss is hard, therefore the harder I try, the better it'll be. Well, once you've tapped out your effort, once you've dieted as hard as you can and you've trained as hard as you can and it still hasn't worked, like where the hell do you go from there? And the answer, honestly, is usually to diet way less hard and train an awful lot less. And it tends to work. It works every time, every single time. But I definitely understand why people struggle with it. I can see why they find it hard to step into that, because again, like, we live in a culture that deifies the hustle. We talk about how the harder you train, the harder you work, the better it's going to be. You need to work, grind. And when grinding doesn't work, you just think, well, I need to grind harder and I just can't. So it's not going to work. And yeah, the amount of times I've worked with people and it's like, right, let's train 3 times a week for about an hour a time. Let's get you into a 20% calorie deficit. You can have a day off on the weekend where you can just go out for a meal with your family and not worry about it, as long as you're sticking to everything the rest of the time. And that'll probably be enough. And like, it seems too simple. And I think that's why people struggle with it. It seems too easy, but it only seems too easy if you've conditioned yourself to think that you're supposed to suffer. And honestly, like, you're just not. It's not supposed to suck that much.
I can relate to that though, because that's what I used to think, and that's why I struggled so much to, like you mentioned, with the scaling back the training. That's why I struggled to go back from 6 days to 5 days, and then from 5 to 4 days. Oh, but if I do less, that means I'm regressing. How is that progressing? How is that this progressive overload that everyone's talking about? It doesn't work that way. And even if you're reducing progressive overload in the short term, in the long term, it's going to reward you a whole lot of dividends. Plus, we weren't born to live in the gym. Like, life is meant to happen. And if you don't bring life with you, what are you doing this for? You're not getting paid for this shit. And it isn't healthier. It isn't better. In what state of mind is consuming yourself with all of this healthier? Like, I used to be there. I get it. I thought that was the answer, but it's not. And grinding harder at a faulty system is not going to make that work. But something you said that I really wanted to touch on was when you said, when you give it all your effort, where is there to go? Less effort, blah, blah, blah. But the thing is, you voluntarily won't even be doing that. You'll be trying harder and harder, but as your motivation wanes, your effort decreases. Even though it feels like you're giving it your best effort, So you're pushing really hard and not seeing results. So you're just going to burn out. And then doing less is going to be done involuntarily. And you're going to feel miserable for it because it's not structured and it's not to where it needs to be. It's a whole shitload less because now you're burnt out. So now we need to build back up again. Walk 50 miles into the woods, you're going to have to walk 50 miles out. I think that sums my part up. Do you have anything else to sum up with?
No, I think that's about covered it, to be fair.
That was such a good podcast, guys. Honestly, please, before you leave this podcast, go to the ratings and give me a 5-star rating, please. It helps me get heard, helps me get seen, helps me get Tom back onto the podcast for season 2. Honestly, we love chatting, we love bantering on with you guys, but there's a lot going on in Tom's world. There's a lot going on in our world as well. But you'll have your regular podcast coming at you, just not the regular ones with Tom for a while, but you'll hear us come again soon. And please go rate it 5 stars. And if you need any help, any advice, visit Tom or me on Instagram, shoot us a message. We would love to chat. And with that, bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.